So I'm posting this video in response to a request for information either about doubling or about switching from tenor to bass trombone, because it's in our collective wisdom, our collective consciousness, not only as trombonists, but as brass players, that because the bass trombone is a completely different instrument, it requires a completely different way of breathing, a completely different way of blowing, and an overall completely different approach in order to get the sound that we need to get. And one of the things I love and loved about Arnold Jacobs' teaching is that he took things that were conventional wisdom, that were ideas at the time, and he put them up just to the test of facts and data. And based on that, he was able to ask questions and say, does this really make sense? I think this is one of those points that we can look at. Most tenor trombonists, if you're really going to play tenor trombone at a high level, at some point you're going to have to play alto trombone. At which point, your tenor trombone teacher will likely say in school, all right, it's time to either check out or borrow an alto trombone, check out one from the school, play some scales on it, maybe play some Blazevich clef studies that are written in alto clef, and get used to reading alto clef on alto trombone, and come in with it in a couple weeks. Let's see where it stands. And so we can surmise that if bass trombone requires a completely different way of blowing, completely different way of playing, and yet alto trombone is just not a big deal, you just pick it up and play it, then it must mean that the difference between tenor and bass is much greater than that between tenor and alto. And so let's take a look at some things. Now, as far as alto trombone, there's a pretty wide variety of bore sizes, but an average, if you look at the larger bores versus the smaller bores and kind of put them together, you're probably going to come up with something around 490 thousandths bore size. And the bore of a symphonic tenor, of a large bore tenor, is 547, for a difference of 57 thousandths of an inch. So, data point 1. Data point 2. If we take our large bore tenor and look at the difference between tenor and bass, large bore tenor is 547, but a single bore slide bass has a bore of 562, for a difference of 15 thousandths. A dual bore slide is 562 on the top, 578 on the bottom, for a difference of 23 thousandths. So let's take a look at those together. When you look at that, the difference from tenor to bass is you are going to see that for a single bore slide, you are actually less than 26% of the difference between tenor and alto. And for a dual bore, you're less than 41% of the difference between tenor and alto. So if you're looking at this video and saying, well, that doesn't make sense, you know what? You're right. It doesn't make sense. So either we say that tenor trombonists, logically, either tenor trombonists need to start teaching a completely different way of blowing the alto trombone and a completely different way of breathing and a completely different approach, or maybe we need to reassess as bass trombonists what it is that we're doing on bass trombone and why we're making such a big deal out of it. Now, so you understand where I'm coming from. Yes, the bass trombone is a different instrument. It is. It does have a larger bore. Just as the alto trombone is a different instrument, it does have a smaller bore. And when tenor trombonists switch to alto, one of the first things you'll find is their sound gets very small. And it takes some time to warm that up, to flesh it out, and to get a full sound on an alto. When we go the opposite way from tenor to bass, our general inclinations are that when we play soft, the sound gets really woolly and woofy. And when we play louder, the sound gets really edgy. It doesn't have the body or the warmth that you want to have in the sound, in addition to the brightness. But is the solution to actively, consciously say, I'm going to approach things in a different way? I don't think so, especially if what we're after is a more natural approach. And so, what does it mean long term? If you're planning to switch, or considering switching from tenor to bass, don't get the idea that you have to do things differently. Your body will figure it out. Just like when we go to alto, we figure it out. Especially, I look at somebody like my colleague Toby, who plays alto so beautifully. It's because he spent time on it. He spent a lot of time on it. And he sounds better than most tenor trombonists do when they go to alto trombone, but because he's really developed his sound on it. But it's not through gerrymandering. It's not through messing around with it. It's through listening to the sound that he wants to get and making that sound and learning how to resonate the instrument. And in the last video I posted, it was about resonation. This is exactly what it's about. Now, if you're already a bass trombonist, you're saying, well, wait a second. I see what you're saying about the differences, but I thought that the bass trombone was supposed to bridge the gap between the tenor trombone and the tubas. I'll say scientifically, engineering-wise, it's not designed to do that. There is a much smaller difference between tenor and bass than there is between bass and tuba. And if lastly you come back and you say, well, I don't care if that's the difference, the sound I hear in my head bridges the gap, I'll say, fine, you can have that opinion. You absolutely can have that opinion. But what I'll go back to is, I once had someone ask me, just when I switched to bass, they said, bass trombonists spend years cultivating their sounds. Are you willing to spend the years necessary to cultivate your sound? And what I'll say is this: if you're trying to take an instrument that's designed to play like a trumpet and make it play more like a flugelhorn, you probably will take years to make that work, because the instrument isn't engineered to do that. What you're trying to do is fundamentally change the resonating structure of the instrument. If, however, you take what the instrument gives you and embrace it and love it, you don't have to do anything special other than learn how to play it with warmth, with clarity, and with beauty. It doesn't require a whole lot of conscious effort on your part, so much as letting your body figure out how to make it resonate in the way that it's designed to do. And that's the key here. Play the instrument in the way it's designed to be played. The less we do, the better we'll be and the happier we'll be. Hope you find it helpful.